We in the Midnight Mirage University night edition. Of course, it's the host Blackbeard. Salute to all the people out there viewing the tapes, sharing the tapes, subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it. And I guess before I get into the tape, the little jewel for the intro will be to basically safeguard your energy. Don't let other people's negative vibes and negative mentalities and things of that nature flow over and influence you, because people are always willing to do that, and people are always looking to transfer burdens to someone else. Now, speaking of transferring burdens, that's going to basically play into what we're talking about tonight. We're going to talk about the Atlas ritual, all right, dealing with the Moorish mythos coming from, ancient Etruria or the ancient Mediterranean area, or also known as ancient Greece. But the mythos of Atlas, all right, before I go too deep into it, Atlas represents the Titan, or one of the old gods, all right? And when the new gods came in, basically one of the burdens that they put on Atlas after the Titans fell was Atlas was charged and put in the position of holding the earth up, all right, or bearing the burden for the earth. So the central thesis in this tape is how, the so-called black male, or the aboriginal male, the aboriginal copper-colored male, in particular in the West, how a lot of people have been propped up and they are given access to a luxurious type of lifestyle because a lot of burdens were, transferred over to you. Now, what are some of these burdens I'm talking about? Well, it's very, very simple. There were times in the past where a lot of our male ancestors were involved in economic conflicts and also physical conflicts such as war. And because, they may have been on the tail end or the wrong end of the stick, it caused them to be prisoners of war. Now, us today are actually the children, the sons of those men. We are the descendants of those prisoners of war, okay? So when you're a prisoner of war, basically you provide labor for free. Your nationality is stripped. You have certain estates and trusts that you don't, get to tap into and have access to like you want. And basically you are in a servitude position, servile position, and everything is at your expense. And that's one of the consequences of losing, certain battles, you could say. So this is something that happened to us. So when we hear about the slavery thing, you need to first think in your head that everything that you are doing to produce any kind of economic advance for the people that are putting you in that prisoner of war situation, it is 100% tax-free and is 100% expense-free for the people that's doing it. So when they talk about the cotton kings in the South during the antebellum, period, or so-called slave period, you got to remember that this is 100% tax-free money, 100% expense-free money. They probably had to pay for, let's say, certain technology, certain cotton gins. They may have had to pay for transferring the cotton from here to there on horse and carriage or whatever that fee may have been. And it may have been a few other expenses. But the primary expense that they had to, or not they had to, but they were allowed to forego is the salary expense or the labor expense that they would pay to the people who are actually providing that service. So it would be like your job. Like imagine if you get paid, let's say 90 or 80,000 a year for your job, but you were doing all that work 100% free. And on top of that, you were in a harsh type of living situation, in a harsh type of living environment. So not only are you providing free work that's producing, a lot of money for other people, but your living conditions even suck. So, that's what I mean by the free labor and creating a luxurious lifestyle for a lot of the people. Now, you got to remember that what I just explained to you was what they call initial investment of the United States corporation. The initial investment, or some of the startup money, or some of the pop-off money, whatever you want to call it. That money came from, the transferring of the slave money, okay, or what they call slave money. Basically, all the hard labor we put in when they were doing their trading and stuff like that, selling the cotton, the profits that they got off of the cotton, how they eventually transferred that money into Wall Street, how they eventually transferred that money into the industrial age, after Reconstruction. You got to remember that in the early 1900s, you had what they call the industrial age. That's when they were doing a lot of their, well, of course, your railroad system and stuff of that nature, and a lot of the infrastructure that was created in that what they call industrial age. You got to remember that initial money came from, the slave period. All right. Also think about in the South here in Georgia, you have Purdue Chicken. All right. And you also had the governor at some point was a guy named Sonny Perdue. So you have the Perdue family, all right, who is, I guess you could say a prominent financial family here in the South, in particular in Georgia. So you got to ask yourself, well, where did the initial funds come from, that Purdue chicken used to get into their activity? And that a lot of that was coming from old slave money. It's no different than a so-called drug dealer. If a drug dealer has money and he's trying to clean his money, let's say he's selling cocaine, but he tries to clean his money by going to buy a car wash or going to buy, a bakery or something like that. What he's doing is he's taking that dirty money and he's cleaning it inside of that business. So the same thing happened to us. A lot of the so-called slave money that was the result of our hard labor, that money was transferred over into new industries after slavery was over. And those new industries were corporations and, different banks that they started, like I said, Wall Street, and a lot of what we know of as the Industrial Revolution, or you can look at it as the corporate revolution. All right. So a lot of this luxurious lifestyle that these European Caucasians were able to tap into was off of that hard labor. All right. So that's your level 1 or tier 1 of the transference of burden, or the Atlas ritual, because in the Atlas ritual, when you see the picture of Atlas, it's this man holding up the earth on his shoulders. OK, he's holding the earth up on his shoulders. And I'm going to go into the black female, how she plays her part into abusing Atlas in this ritual. But it's a 2-tier thing about who's living this luxurious life. Really, everybody in the world is benefiting from this luxurious lifestyle. The first part is, the physical labor that the melanated male in the West was putting in on the initial front end that was, all free, that he got no return on. And then on top of that, the fact that his nationality has been stripped, meaning that, he's not owning any of the corporate stuff that's really on his own land. He's not controlling his own government. A lot of the gold and a lot of the physical assets that are being held, and that's under the custodian position of the original American. He's not really able to use any of these instruments. So this is, putting him in that Atlas position. So a lot of this is also why you have a lot of European Caucasians here in the West that are blinded by, what life is really about. So, for example, me and my business partner was out earlier. We came across this European Caucasian male, and we just got to talking and stuff like that. And he naturally just walked up to us and started, running his mouth. But anyway, I was explaining to him the concept of staying down to come up. And, I gave the guy a lot of analogies, such as, in basketball games, like when you have a player on the bench, he's sitting on the bench, he's trying to figure out what he's going to do when he gets in a game. In other words, he's going through his preliminary stages before his actual activity. A lot of times before you go into doing some shit, you need to be sitting down trying to figure out what you're going to do before it gets started. So when we say stay down, we mean you're going through the stages of trying to figure out what is needed to be successful. And coming up is when you rise up and actually start doing these things to be successful. So I was explaining these concepts to him in a variety of ways. And the European Caucasian male just really couldn't understand what I'm saying. And one thing he said as I was explaining this, he said, "Look, dude, I'm white. I really don't know what you mean by stay down to come up." So subconsciously what he's saying is that, I don't have to really stay down. You know what I'm saying? I'm always in a stage of being up. So a lot of these European Caucasians are actually blinded because of the benefits via the Atlas ritual. And a lot of the luxurious lifestyle, a lot of the, perks that they have gotten are actually the result of them taking our nationality and putting themselves in the status of being free white people. Because free white people actually would be, everybody here in American soil, that basically is of North African, ancestry. OK, and it's really only one people that's here that predominantly have North African ancestry as the whole makeup of what they are. And that would be us, the Aboriginal Americans, Aboriginal Moors, the Algonquin Americans, whatever you want to call it. But basically just the melanated people here. We really are the only legal and lawful free white people in the United States. OK, because white and black actually is more of a caste system, and it's a status type thing, So in other words, let's say I go to your house. When I'm in your house, I'm not a first-class citizen. I'm a second-class citizen. I don't have the right to just go in your refrigerator. I don't have the right to just go in your room and start going through all your drawers. I don't have the right to just start going in your closet and start dealing with all your stuff. Why? Because I'm a second-class citizen. I'm in your environment. You have the first rights to go in your closet, whatever you want. You have the first rights to go into the refrigerator when you want. You have the first rights to go into the drawer, whatever you want. So that means that any kind of privileges or any kind of moving around I do in your house, I have to get your permission to do that. So in that example, you have the primary status and I will have the secondary status. OK, So in other words, in that situation, you would be classified as the white person and I would be classified as the black person, not because of my ethnicity, but because of the status and because how we could roam within that jurisdiction. So that's what they've done, through a lot of propaganda, through a lot of trickery and deception, and through a lot of sellout ass people that pump this Afrocentric stuff in the fake conscious community, which is actually part of the COINTELPRO shit. A lot of that is why he has been allowed to put himself in, the white position. Okay. But white really is only a status thing. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. So really, the Aboriginal melanated people here are actually the white people. The European Caucasian foreigners are actually the black people. All right. So that's also, part of the Atlas ritual of why, they have that sense of not understanding hard work on a deeper level, because a lot of the labor has been transferred to us. There's a lot of stuff they don't have to do. Well, you eating off of us, on the nationality tip by getting money from having a white status. And on top of that, when you getting free labor from us, and you still are eating off of the initial investment, the initial millions of dollars that came from free money, the initial billions and trillions of dollars that came from free money. And you've been flipping that since, let's say, the 1800s. I mean, this is why they don't understand certain things. So when I come with concepts like stay down and come up, he has no idea what I'm talking about, etc. But I find it funny that usually when I talk to melanated people, in particular melanated males, men and boys, they always know what I'm talking about. And usually if I introduce it to a melanated female, if she doesn't know initially what I'm talking about, after I explain the concept, she understands what I'm talking about. So usually melanated people, copper colored people, we understand the concept of stay down and come up, because usually a lot of us are already in a low position. All right. So he didn't understand that because he has the white privilege, or so-called white privilege. This actually allows him to be blinded by that. And he doesn't have to tap into staying down because he's already in the stage of being up. So on one end, that's the luxury that has been provided for the Caucasian male. Another thing when it deals with the Atlas ritual, you have a lot of so-called black females that will transfer certain emotional and mental stress onto strong masculine melanated men that rise up. So let me go into that a little bit. You got to already remember that in a lot of our so-called black communities, we have been missing the male element for quite some time. Okay, the male element has been missing for quite some time, whether that be grandfather, father, older brother, uncle. A lot of us have missed some type of older male element. And if the male element was present physically, then either psychically, emotionally, financially, or spiritually, they were absent. So you have a lot of, fathers that may have been in people's lives, but they ain't really had no real role like that. You know what I'm saying? So there's been a lot of, alternate types of lifestyles we've had to live because the male thing has been present. And what ends up happening is that people start becoming overzealous, people start becoming thirsty, and people start becoming very, very needy and very, very attentive, and wanting of that real masculine melanated energy. Okay. Now, when this energy shows up, because it's been missing for so long, people are very, very quick to transfer all aspects of burden to this male because they've been looking for it and been craving it for quite some time. And a lot of so-called black women, they have that problem, and it's very, very subconscious. I noticed that they don't notice it. All right. So you have that, and it could be either a girlfriend, it could be women in your family, and all the way to women that you work with. Okay. It could be to women that you work with, because I noticed that a lot of women that are, a lot of so-called black women, because they've been missing a lot of that masculine element, any kind of male that comes in their life, no matter what their real relationship and involvement with that person, whether it be financial or any other kind of relationship, not financial, but professional, like when you work with somebody, whether it's a professional relationship with a so-called masculine black male or any other kind of relationship, they're going to immediately start transferring emotional, mental, and if you're not careful, financial guilt and stress onto that black male. And this is something that you brothers got to watch out for. And this is something that you have to avoid at all costs, because this is the Atlas ritual. All right. If you notice in a lot of these so-called African paintings and pictures, you will always find the male in a position of some form of hard burden, either to holding the earth up or holding something up, and then you'll have this black female basically sitting behind and being able to get the results and the benefits of this male holding the earth up. And you see this in a lot of paintings. All right. If you don't believe me, next time you go to a mall, especially if you live in a, an urban area, just look in like the little store with the African paintings and stuff like that. And you will find a lot of pictures that shows basically the male doing a lot of the hard work and the female just sitting back chilling. So when you look in, the United States system, you had that same thing going down. Let's just take the child support thing, for example. That's an aspect of the Atlas ritual. You have this burden that has been placed on these men that they already being discriminated and treated a certain way because of their ethnicity, and because that, the people that are in a custodian position of government know that they really are prisoners of war and know that they really are enemies of the people in the position of custodianship. They know that. So nothing is really going to be set up favorably for these melanated men on this, American soil until they get back into proper position. Nothing's going to be set up favorable. So the Atlas ritual is used in that system when it comes to the production of children and the whole child support thing. Let's look at it like this. During the whole prisoner of war, so-called slavery situation, a lot of these so-called black females either directly or indirectly learned and figured out that the more children I produce for this slave system, the more money that this so-called slave master can make, the more benefits that I receive, basically. Okay. And this is what was going down. So you had a child support type of system even going on during so-called slavery. What it exactly was, I don't know. I'm not saying that the so-called black male was paying cash payments to people, but it could have been certain privileges. Maybe every now and then they let the women, hang out for a little while and didn't have to work, or I don't know what it may have been. Maybe they gave them extra food. Maybe they gave them a dress every now and then. Maybe they would allow them to go to certain ballrooms or go to certain dances and stuff like that. I don't know what it may have been, but you better believe that there was some type of incentive that these so-called black females had during this prisoner of war or slavery situation. And they knew that if, the more children that they have, basically, the more, the so-called white man can produce for himself, or the European Caucasian produce for himself. Therefore, the happier he is, therefore, the nicer he treats her. And, once again, this was either directly, laid out and disclosed, or it was indirectly. But either way it goes, the black female, she agreed to it. She didn't say, no, I'm going to go the opposite and either not have children and rebel against that, or I'm going to have children, but I'm going to train my sons and daughters to rebel against your system. We know that she didn't do either one of those. She didn't agree to not have children, and she didn't agree to train her children to be rebellious against the slave system. That's not what went down. It actually was the complete opposite. If you want information on what I'm talking about, just look into the Willie Lynch documents that were created. And although we know the Willie Lynch documents were maybe a book created by, a so-called black person in the 70s, either way it goes, it still describes what was going on at that time period. So it's still, valid. So in other words, this so-called black female, she got a financial, incentive and financial benefit from placing burden on the black male by having him produce these children, and she getting paid for it. So today it's no different with the child support system. You know what I'm saying? It's no different. Like, the only thing that's really different is that they play the black male a little bit different to seduce him to have the children. During the so-called slavery, I honestly think that they was probably either forcing them, a lot of them, to have sex, or they were doing certain things to force them, just like in the movie Goodbye Uncle Tom. You had seen in the movie where they was on a so-called boat, and, some of the men didn't want to eat food, basically because they didn't want to live and basically play into that whole being slave shit. So you had situations where they was busting out the men's mouths and forcing them to eat food, and forcing them to, take in some type of nutrition so they could stay alive to keep being slaves for them. So it may have been the same way with the children and producing these children. Like I told you all before, in the Greek mythos of Saturn actually deals with the number one sphere on the tree of life as well, or Kether. All right. In Greek mythology, they say that Saturn, or in Roman mythology, they say that Saturn was known for eating his children. What that means is that the same force that produces is also the same force that destroys. So you know how they say that the Most High is the Alpha and the Omega. Well, the same birth that destroys is the same birth that births. All right. So in other words, the same spiritual force or spiritual energy or spiritual conscience or spiritual presence that makes things happen also causes things to stop happening. All right. So when we say that Saturn, eats his own children, what it's saying is that, this force has a duality. It has a force, it has an ability to birth something, and it has an ability to basically not allow something to be born. So that polarity of Saturn of not allowing something to be born could be these men not wanting to have children, but they were forced into doing it by, probably a multiplicity of ways. I don't know, but I know how they forced the men to do it in the modern way by vagina validation. You know what I'm saying? By making it seem like, you're not the man if you don't have all the ladies, by making men feel insecure if they stay focused on other things and they not having sex and stuff of that nature. Basically by guilting men into feeling inadequate for not having female attention and not having women at your will and not appearing as maybe this Don Juan type of figure. And a lot of this propaganda is put out in entertainment, TV, and a lot of other things that we deal with on a social level. And this ensures that the men will go out and try to impress the women. And when they do that, the result of that, of course, is the sex. And the yield of the sex usually is a child. All right. So, when you have things like strip clubs and things of that nature, that's a symbol to show you that, they have ways to trick the men into having children today. Just have a bunch of women in there, because it's always usually so-called black females in these clubs. Have them in there with some tight G-string on, some kind of bra, something like that, and have her dance and things of this nature. And it elicits sexual desire in the man. Next thing you know, he wants to produce a child. Next thing you know, not necessarily produce a child. Next thing you know, he wants to have sex. And then next thing you know, it produces a child. When that child is produced, now that child can be weaponized against him to kick in, once again, child support payments, and to financially strap him, to psychologically and emotionally stress him out. And then once again, that is the Atlas ritual of him having that burden or the world placed on his back. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of you men got to watch out for that. When y'all start having stuff happen for you and you allowed to start going to certain business environments and stuff like that, don't let nobody transfer no kind of guilt on you. Don't let nobody transfer their emotional imbalances on you. Like, look out for all that shit, bro. And at the end of the day, it's really a game of hot potato. Like, that's how a lot of people are. This United States system has been trained to play hot potato with the so-called black male, to always transfer burden onto his back. And for so many years, he's just been accepting and taking the burden. But at some point, Atlas has to rise up and throw the earth off his back. And that's the stage we in now, with me using it, making this tape. You see what I'm saying? This stay down to come up tape, the Atlas ritual. Like, now we at a point in the game where Atlas rises up to take the earth off of his back. Like I said, you only stay down to come up. Now think about what I'm telling you. When you look at the Atlas picture, he is kneeling down in a down position. He's on the ground. He's down because the earth is heavy. It got him way on the ground because it's a burden. It's heavy. It's holding him down. He's not able to function properly because that shit is very, very heavy and it's holding him down. But when he comes up and he's freed, the earth is released from his back. The pressure is released from his back. The burden is released from his back. So that's what you men have to do. You have to allow all psychological burdens to be removed, emotional burdens to be removed, spiritual burdens to be removed, and financial burdens to be removed. You don't need none of these burdens on you. Okay? And everything I just named, this system of so-called white supremacy, the European Caucasians that manipulate that system, and the so-called black females that benefit from that system, all three of those elements I just named are here to place burden on your back. Well, let me repeat this. The so-called white supremacist system, which is regardless of a person, that thing is actually a certain energy and spirit by now that moves on its own. That's the first thing that's trying to put burden on you. The second thing that's trying to put burden on you is the European Caucasian or so-called white people who are manipulating that system and who implemented that system a long time ago. Those are the second people that's trying to put burdens on you. The third people trying to put burdens on you are the so-called black females that benefit off of the white supremacist system, and they benefit off of the European Caucasian people who manipulate that system. And those European Caucasian people have agreed to manipulate that system in a way to where it is beneficial for the so-called black female. So all three of those entities are the origin and the source of that burden being placed on your back. So when you figure out how to master the so-called white supremacist system, the burden is off your back. When you master the psychology and the pathology of so-called white people and black women, the burden is now removed from your back. So that's the name of this game. I know a lot of the shit that you've been dealing with and a lot of pressure you've been feeling in your life, whether you understood it or not, it was the Atlas ritual. And you were feeling that heavy burden on your back. You just didn't know where it was coming from. And, you know, another thing, you know, a lot of the things that a lot of burden to be put on your back too is having blind compassion. When you are casting pearl to swine, when you are actually investing your energy and time and emotion and resources and efforts into shit that don't matter and shit that's really just parasiting you off of you and shit that ain't gonna give nothing back to you. You know what I'm saying? Shit that needs you more than you need it. That's another thing that keeps you weighed down. So all these burdens have to be removed. Absolutely all of them. Like, and the way you do that is by being cutthroat. Sometimes you have to turn your compassion off. You know, you got to be black-hearted. Like, it's a tape I made one time in the past where, like I said, an aspect of my heart is very, very red. It's filled up with love, joy, compassion, abundance, you know what I'm saying, sharing and caring. But the other side of that shit is black as hell, it's dark as fuck, it's gloomy as hell, and it's more magnetic, meaning that I'm more so absorbing shit from other people, and ain't nobody getting shit up out of me. You feel what I'm saying? And I'm repelling your energy, and I'm not allowing your energy to have any kind of influence or any kind of effect on me. So in other words, I know when to activate my red heart, and I know when to activate my black heart. And we in a time frame now where you have to activate your black heart a lot more to be successful. You have to activate your black heart to be successful more physically. You have to activate your black heart to be successful more emotionally. You have to activate your black heart to be successful more financially. That's what we are at it. And this is with everybody in your life. All right. Everybody in your life. So this is some real shit. This Atlas ritual. You know, a lot of people, man, they love placing burdens on so-called black males. This is what the whole game is about. And this is how everybody has been eating this whole time, because you've been holding the burden. You know, this is why. This is why these so-called white people don't know what's going on. This is why they don't understand any of the things that black people say, or so-called black people. This is why they view all our stuff in entertainment and all that as being real creative, and why they have this divine-like perception of us. This is why, because they've been on that pedestal for so long that they done forgot how shit really is. You know, they forgot how shit really is. But now I'm about to give you the tail end of this shit, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. Now what we doing is as intelligent, spiritual, Heru, masculine archetypes, the masculine melanated copper men of the West, the real American men. What we are doing now is now we are transferring the burden back to those people. So what you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to use and manipulate the white supremacist system, and then you're supposed to figure out ways to transfer the burden back to so-called white people and so-called black women, because those were the people that actually were transferring it to you. And if you're not careful, they always will transfer it to you. You know, they're gonna have times, you know, where they come out and act like they nice and there's really no beef, but collectively, so-called black women and so-called white people are going to always want to transfer the burden to so-called black males. I'm not saying all so-called black women are like that. I'm not saying all so-called white people may be that way. But for the majority, you can already expect and, you know, go ahead and be able to guarantee that they're going to always want to transfer that burden. I mean, let's just think about it. Like, they're looking at it like, if the so-called black male been doing this shit for so long and he hasn't been getting paid, why start paying him? You see, that's another thing too, in like in the world of business. Like, you know, in the world of business, a lot, when you coming up and you proving yourself and you trying to get your foot in the door, you may do a lot of work, and sometimes you may not be compensated for it. And that's okay, because everything ain't always about money. Sometimes it's about experience, and sometimes it's about placing yourself in a proper position so you can get the money in the long term indefinitely. But what will happen is that when you're in that stage of doing that, and your stay down stage, you will have people take advantage of you, you know, and they won't want to really pay out when it's time to pay out. And they're going to always expect you to do shit for free, because they look at it like, well, you've been doing it for free, so why do I have to pay you all of a sudden now? And that's how black women are going to view you black men. And that's how white supremacy is going to view you white, so-called black men. And that's how white people as a whole going to view you so-called black men. They're going to view you like, why should we give you your nationality back and give back your seats of Congress and your seats of government? You know, give back the rights to all this stuff, your estates and trusts. Why give that back to you now when you've been working for free this whole time? So-called black women going to say, well, why give you the position of dominant when I've been telling myself I'm a strong, independent woman? You know, I've been empowered by white supremacy, and I've, you know, made certain agreements with white people. I've been living this lavish lifestyle. I haven't been having to put in too much effort, just a little bit of effort, but not too much. You know, I've been the leader of the household. So why am I going to really give all that up to pay you back now when you've been, you know, you've been at the bottom for this long? So why not stay there? So both of these parties are going to think this either subconsciously or consciously. And as a so-called black male, you don't need to expect them to think no other way. What you need to do is that you need to transfer the burden to them. So if you notice them trying to transfer it to you, you just transfer that shit right back to them. You see what I'm saying? And that's how you survive in this game. This shit is about endurance, and it's about remaining on your square. Okay? So I just wanted to drop this, man. The Atlas ritual. Stay down and come up. You know, I ain't gonna lie to you. All of us so-called black males are victims of the Atlas ritual. We all have some form of burden of us on our back. But, you know, I can honestly say that my higher self has removed a lot of these burdens, especially in the last 2 weeks, because, you know, I've been mentally and spiritually moving in a different direction, and my physical world is changing. And the reason why I'm dropping this tape, because, you know, if this is working for me, it's working for you. It'll work for you. Okay. So you need to do this because a lot of you all are about to get success. A lot of the things you've always wanted, you're about to achieve and obtain these things. But when you're about to achieve and obtain something, you know, on the tail cold end of that, you have something that's coming to take that away. And believe it or not, you know, it is this same white supremacist system, and it is a lot of these so-called black females that are going to enter your life, either through the professional aspect or through relationship aspect. And they are actually looking to transfer some kind of burden to you, believe it or not. I always expect it. Never get surprised when it happens. All right. So it's the boy Blackbeard. Stay down and come up shit. I'm out.